different acoustic treatments at different positions in order to create some different acoustic environments. And that's something we've been mindful of in this space.
It gives you the best of both worlds when you design a room with live end, dead end, because a lot of times they just have one singular room that they have to do everything in. So live end, dead end room design works perfectly for that, because you have the dead end, which is typically where you put your control position, and your mix position is located there. You have a very controlled environment that you don't have a lot of reflections, but then in the back part of the room you have diffusers and other materials that reflect the sound, so that you could set up an acoustic guitar or set up a drum set and it still sound natural and be able to breathe in a room like that. You have to walk the tightrope between what's going to be best for monitoring, what's going to be best for recording, and the live end dead end works great for that.
Here are some construction concepts that can help you build a better studio. Sound doesn't only travel through air, it also gets transmitted via the vibrations between two or more surfaces. So if we can isolate those surfaces from each other, or at least minimize the points of contact between them, we can substantially improve unwanted transmission or vibration.
You need mass and decoupling in order to stop sound.
Ideally, a studio should have a floating floor. In other words, a floor that's not in direct contact with the floor joists or the foundation, but is cushioned by rubber or some other highly absorptive material. Alternatively, it can be suspended in midair from above. The other thing you can plan for, if you're constructing your own space, is non-parallel walls. There's some debate at how non-parallel you need to be in order to reduce what we call flutter. And here, both the walls and floor to ceiling are approximately 5% off true. Maybe we didn't wholly succeed in that department with our purpose-built studio, but we did use staggered studs for the wall joists, and this is a relatively simple technique you can use to reduce points of contact. The corners are particularly important in a small room because of room modes that can result in standing waves. These bounce back and forth in a room, distorting the appearance of not only the low frequencies themselves, but also at related harmonics. Trapping the bass to prevent this is vital in a small room. Here in our studio, bass traps have been built directly into the corners. You can also construct or purchase off-the-shelf bass traps to cure this problem. Issues to bear in mind with ceilings include how load-bearing they need to be, and so how much weight of construction material can be used, and avoiding the ceiling being parallel to the floor. Track lighting is often a good idea because you'll have fewer holes going out into the outside world above. Windows and doors are two obvious potential weak points in terms of isolation. Windows should be sealed, double or triple glazed on both sides, and should contain as little direct contact with the framing as possible. Doors should be constructed from dense material and need to be airtight. Ideally, use double thickness or communicating doors. The thickness of the absorptive material you use particularly affects low frequencies. You can also install off-the-shelf sound traps and diffusers. You can compensate for less mass in your material by not attaching it directly to the walls, rather mounting it 2 or more inches away. A room that only cuts down on the highs and mids will produce a totally false bass picture. At all times, you want to make sure as little sound as possible comes in or goes out. A measurement you might want to familiarize yourself with is STC, or Sound Transmission Class, which measures how much sound penetrates the materials you'll use to construct your studio surfaces. Different materials like drywall, or plasterboard for you Europeans, or this special rubbery compound that you can sandwich in between layers of drywall called sheet block, come with different STC numbers. The higher the number, the greater the soundproofing. In total, you should aim for an STC rating of more than 45. This might sound simple enough, but it's not a question of adding up different materials' STC number. It doesn't quite work like that. Use the STC as a basic indicator from which a reasonably accurate prediction can be made.
It's definitely a two-way street with sound isolation, because you've got sound that you're trying to keep within the room if you don't want to disturb other people outside of the room, but then you also have external noises like airplanes, it could be train tracks that are nearby, a busy street, noise coming in from other rooms through the HVAC system. There's all sorts of paths for sound to come into the room. If you're trying to soundproof your room, it's very similar to trying to waterproof your room. If you were to imagine filling your entire room up with water and finding the areas that it's going to leak out, that's the same place that that sound's going to leak out. So if you can see daylight around the door when it's shut, sound's going to just zip right underneath the door, travel out in other places. HVAC systems are a big issue.
So what can you do for a few $100s? A bookshelf with some suitably dense reading matter, Dostoevsky works especially well, can make a good, inexpensive sound diffuser.
Okay, so here we are in the specially designed and built Art and Science of Sound recording studio. And having spent so much time and effort getting the physical space constructed, it's important to make sure the equipment layout of the room is right as well. You don't want your working position to be in the center of the room, for instance, so where we are now is approximately a third of the way back, which is an ideal position. Most crucially, the speakers need to be aligned in a position that forms an approximate equilateral triangle between the two speakers and the listening position, with the tweeters at approximately ear level. You don't want the speakers to be too close to walls and never in a corner unless the speakers in question are specifically designed for it, or you can place them in a specially treated area in a corner. Even though a lot of thought has gone into this space, you can do a lot with freestanding bass traps and wall-mounted diffusers in a far less custom-built environment. It also never hurts to run some tests in your room. You can do this on your own using tones, or you can go to a company like Auralex, who uses software to analyze problem areas and provide you with solutions.
No matter whether you have the budget for a custom build or simply a few bass traps in your garage, what we've just covered should help you optimize the acoustics in your recording environment. In terms of isolation, probably the #1 issue for most people at home, a lot depends on how problematic external noise may be and the consequences of waking the neighbors when you play music at 50 billion decibels at 3 in the morning.